always fun, you know, as a Mike. Hi, Mike. Hi, Mike. Hi, Mike. Hi, Mike. That happens a lot. So, and also, so Mike and his twin brother Steve have become some of the most accomplished high-altitude skiers in the world. They come from skiing royalty. The Marolt family name is blazoned across the annals of skiing in the United States, and they've certainly picked up that mantle and carried it. By day, they're mild-mannered, middle-aged CTAs, and I'm pretty sure what happens is that the bat signal goes off in the sky, and they stand up and they rip open their suits, and there's a big giant M on their chest. And off they go to scale all these amazing peaks and do all these amazing adventures around the world. So without any more hyperbole, let me introduce to you Mike Marolt.
Okay. All right.
That was me. Sorry, that was Mike.
Anyways, thanks for coming out, and thanks to the organization here for asking me. It's a thrill. I'm fourth generation in Aspen, so the history of the town is near and dear. And really, you know, my family came from Slovenia, and they became miners, and then they became cattlemen and ranchers, and what is now the municipal golf course was the Marolt Midland Ranch. And the brothers, my grandfather and my great uncles, bought that, ran a potato farm, cattle ranch, sheep ranch on that property, and then in the 50s they sold that whole piece of property, which was really meadow wood down to the river in between the bridges, for about $153,000, which back then was a pile of money. And we kind of laugh and think, you know, well, why didn't they sit on some of that property when some of the other families that were down valley kept theirs? And it really was a blessing because it gave them enough money to stay here. But if you were to talk to Steve Marolt, my great uncle, he used to talk about how difficult times were in Aspen in the 50s, and he said, you know, that property was so far down the valley they couldn't give it away. It was just too far off the beaten path. So they stayed here, and then my father's generation came, and really, Dad was influenced by his uncles, which Albina Takauchik, Gerbaz, and George Takauchik. They were the first generation of my family that really started to go out into the peaks, and they started in the 30s and 40s, and they started to climb up and ski down on skis that they made from pulling up the barn wood in some of the vacant barns and then molding it over the summer to have tips, and then they would go out and they would go skiing. So that influenced Dad. There was not a lot going on in Aspen, and frankly, Dad and Billy, my uncles, and you know, their contemporaries, they just wanted to get the hell out of Aspen. There was nothing to do here, and ski racing was a way for them to get out. But anyway, so that's a little brief history of why I'm into skiing and stuff like that. But the really cool aspect about Aspen for me, being a high altitude mountaineer and a climber, there's a history here that starts in the 30s, not just with my family, but with some really big name people. And even people in the organization and a lot of people in town don't realize that Aspen really has one of the most substantial histories in high altitude climbing and skiing, even compared to some of the towns in Europe. And if you go back to the 30s, a guy named Andre Roach, who everybody's familiar with as being one of the founders of Aspen and a ski racer, he really started that tradition, and we'll get into that when we get into the presentation. But I'm going to use that as a jumping off point to kind of get into my generation, Steve, my twin brother, Jim Guile, who grew up here. We're gonna just kind of show a 2-minute video on a film called Skiing Everest, and I'd love to show the film. It's a 90-minute feature film, so it's too long for this. But I'm going to start with that, just to kind of give stuff a little action. And the reason I want to give stuff a little action is because in 2000, I didn't take any more pictures. I started carrying a video camera and I started producing films. And this is a trailer for Skiing Everest, which we had great success with. It ran on ESPN for a couple years. We toured it with a variety of theater chains nationally, and we had a great time with it. But this will give you kind of an idea of the action and how almost pathetic skiing is above 7,000 meters. You're just very limited. So we'll go ahead and run that, and then we'll get back into the history with Andre and some of these other characters.
What year?
2009. It's Mount Everest. It's a adventurer's peak. It's everything you hear about it. It just draws you to it.
We had no clue about other people that were doing high altitude skiing.
Skiing Everest had been a dream for us for a long, long time.
1 in 35 people died trying to climb in the 8,000 meter arena.
A lot of people do ask, why do you do it?
If you make a mistake and you fall, you're dead. Mountains don't care who you are.
Trying to ski at that altitude is absolutely insane. Every single turn was a ridiculous struggle.
Altitude can sneak up on you and it can just slam you. It doesn't matter how strong you are, how experienced you are.
It's unbelievably draining. It's an altitude game, and it's a mental game. It's survival skiing.
Gotta push yourself into that discomfort zone.
25, 26 hours.
We didn't even really think of bringing oxygen.
About 7,700 meters.
It's not a matter of getting to the top, it's a matter of getting as far as your body's gonna let you. And you know that that's your summit.
Jimmy is the big brother figure on these trips, the calm voice of reason. John's an Olympian and a tremendous athlete. Mike motivates everyone, and the fact that he gets the footage that he gets, he's passionate about it.
Steve has graduated into being the leader on the trips, the person that everyone agrees has the final say.
When you're out there on those peaks, the camaraderie of being part of a team is like nothing else in the world.
I was scared out of my mind.
I stopped and thought to myself, this is not where I want to die.
We heard this huge crash. At that moment, I just thought, so this is how it all ends. Mike looks at me and he says, what do we do? And I said, run.
Climbing without skiing is just pain and suffering with lousy food at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned.
Climbers have short memories, and the stuff that you don't like, you forget real quick, and the stuff that you do like, you hang on forever.
Okay. So one day we'll bring that film back out and we'll show it in town because people seem to enjoy it. Leave it to Hollywood to kind of hype something, and the trailer's a little hyped up. The thing about this, and we'll get into it in the pictures, is it's when you look at the natural progression, it's what you're doing is dangerous, but over a period of 25 years, you learn how to do it. But anyways, we'll talk about some of that stuff. Let's get back to kind of this history of skiing. So starting back in the 30s, Andre Roche was a Swiss mountaineer. And this is a picture of, I'm not sure who he's with, but Andre Roche came to Aspen. The part of the history of Andre Roche that a lot of people don't realize is that in the 50s, he had a high altitude climbing record on Everest. The year before Everest was finally climbed, he and a couple of buddies and a couple Sherpa got up to over 28,000 feet on the route that would be climbed by Hillary the next year. And they did that with no supplemental oxygen in a really almost totally pure approach. Nobody had been up on that route. They pioneered the route, and they really laid the tracks and broke the trail for all the future successes on that southern route. But if you back up the calendar back to the 30s, and I found this, and there's a little bit of this in my film, Skiing Everest, and I had no idea. A guy found out that I was doing this film, and he said, you need to read this book. And so I said, well, send it to me. So this guy sent me this book, and it's the only copy I've ever been able to find. And it's Fred Smythe, Andre Roach, and a few people back in the 30s that were climbing and skiing 7,000 meter peaks, and the book is called Kameh, which is a 7,000 meter peak in India. And so I started to go through this book, and it's primarily a climbing book, and I came across this section where Andre Roach carried his skis to above 7,000 meters, didn't ski from the summit of the peak, but got to above 7,000 meters in the 30s, no less. To put this in context, the 30s is when Tillman and Shipton were really figuring out how to get into those mountains, and along the way they were mapping it. Kameh had only been mapped by those guys the year before they went and climbed it. And so they got the first ascent of Kameh, and Andre Roach, being a skier, being just a passionate skier, said, I'm bringing skis. And for me to think about carrying skis and how difficult it is to above 7,000 meters, to just think about the gear that they had and the gear that they were using, it's mind-boggling. And not many people know that. I didn't know that, and I collect mountaineering literature and I study this stuff. And so I found this book, and so that made it into the film. But then I started to think about the roots of how important that was in the scheme of Aspen, because shortly thereafter Andre came and made Aspen his home, and I immediately connected with him, even though I only met him as a little kid, just because he was a passionate mountaineer, but he was a much more passionate skier. You had to have a lot of passion to take skis to India and climb to 7,000 meters back then. I mean, the skis and the gear weighed more than all of his climbing gear. So Andre Roach really started it. That was a high altitude record until 1964, when Fritz Stomberger, a German, Aspen-based German climber, started to get into climbing. And here again, Fritz was a guy that was passionate about climbing, but he was even more passionate about skiing. So this is Fritz, and Fritz is, he's an interesting guy. I can remember as a little kid seeing this guy running up Spar Gulch in the middle of winter with snowballs in his hands in what looked like boxer shorts and no shirt in the snow, running up the mountain, training for these high altitude climbs. And he was a passionate skier. He has a lot of ski routes in the Elk Range, the Stomberger face, the Stomberger Couloir on Sopris, and he was passionate about skiing. And he got involved with an expedition to a 8,000 meter peak, Cho-Yu, and in I think it was 1964, he went off to Cho-Yu, and here again, not many people know that he summited. People know that he was the first person to climb Cho-Yu without oxygen, but a lot of people don't know that he skied that peak. And in my process of putting together Skiing Everest, I came across a film called The Death Zone, which was his attempt to climb Makalu. And there's this footage of him carrying skis. He didn't ski on Makalu, but I started to dig further, and it's like, wow, this guy took skis to these 8,000 meter peaks. He's known for being a climber, but here's this old footage with these skis on the pack, and I thought, I gotta look into that. And then I found out that he skied Cho-Yu in the 60s. And from the time that Roach had skied Kameh from 7,000 meters, which is about 23,000 feet, that was a high altitude record until Fritz came around and skied from 24,000 feet on Cho-Yu. So since Fritz and Andre kind of set the stage for this stuff, we've had other characters, not so much in the high altitude stuff, but we had one other guy that came after Fritz, a guy named Chris Landry. And Chris was a guy that was just incredibly creative. He was a fantastic climber. He was, again, just totally passionate about skiing. And in the 70s, he came along, and he was the first person to ski off of the east face of Pyramid, which I could put up a good argument was the greatest ski descent in the continental states, even comparing it to the Tetons, just because it's higher and it was just a little bit more difficult route than the routes that were skied later on in the Tetons. He had the bug to go ski high altitude, and he decided to go on an expedition to Denali, and his objective became what is now referred to as the Orient Express, which is a couloir that goes from 14,000 feet up to 20,000 feet on the face of Denali, named the Orient Express because a lot of Koreans and Asians have fallen down the thing with not such great results. So Chris went, he climbed up, got to the summit, he came back down, and unfortunately he was skiing and he hit a patch of ice and he slid, similarly to the Asians before him, all the way down the face, and it pretty much cured him of wanting to go higher because he survived, but it was just an unbelievable, that's probably a 6,000 foot slide at 45 or 50 degrees all the way down to the Cirque, and he lived, but I spoke to him years after the fact on the phone, and he said that pretty much cured me of the whole high altitude thing. The thing you have to understand when you're skiing at altitude compared to even the 14ers or the 13ers is when you get above 7,000 meters, you're in an atmosphere where the air is a third of what it is at sea level. And gravity doesn't slow down, but your mind slows down drastically. And so you really have to be very careful. You really have to understand that when you're skiing above 6,000 meters, which is 20,000 feet, that you're at the mercy of gravity. Your mind is numbed, it's slowed down, so you have to pick ski routes that allow you to naturally progress. And that's what Steve and Jim and I and a few other characters from around here really concentrated on. So we started out, after we got out of college in the late 80s, we started going to the Northwest. We started doing a lot of trips to Rainier and some of those big volcanoes there. And then by 1990, we decided we wanted to take our skills to Alaska and the Denali Range and the St. Elias Range. And we spent several seasons up there climbing the big peaks, Denali and St. Elias and Logan and attempts, on all those big peaks, Blackburn, Lucania, and all that stuff. And it really gave us a great working knowledge of handling severe cold, fairly high altitude, and just extreme weather. And after 7 years, a local, Steve Gall, who some of you may have heard of, he was guiding on Denali, and he said, "What is wrong with you guys?" He said, "You have been going up there and beating yourself to death. You typically climb 1 day for every 3 days that you're in a tent." He said, "Go to South America." He said, "Go get some higher altitude and have almost guaranteed perfect weather." We had a set of teachers that brought us through the 8th grade outdoor ed program. They were all going to Alaska. Then they started going to Bolivia. So we said, okay, let's take a change in venue. We got into South America, climbed some 6,000 meter peaks, and we realized that we had the ability to thrive at altitude and to really enjoy it. And so we spent all those years, several years in Alaska. Then we started going into South America. When we realized we had this just total passion for altitude, we decided that we wanted to take on an 8,000 meter peak. So this is the first 8,000 meter peak that we decided to take on, and this is a Broad Peak, which is 26,300 or 400 feet. And it has a moderately benign reputation, but what you don't understand until you go is that you got an 80-mile trek to get to it. And the trek, it leads you to Broad Peak and the Gasherbrooms in K2. It's just an amazing 80-mile trek, but it's the scariest, hairiest trek that you will ever go on. But here is the, if you look, the route comes from over here, then it comes up this face, and it goes up there and then to the top. This next picture shows the lower slopes. The Karakoram Range is an extremely steep range. It's beautiful peaks. K2 would be off to this side, and the Gasherbrums would be off to this side. But we loaded up. We had no idea what to expect. We'd only been to 6,000 meters, and we got to base camp. We were really lucky. A guy named Ed Viesters and Veka Gustafsson were looking for a permit. Ed had just started his play to become the first American to climb all 14 8,000 meter peaks. We connected, and he got in on our permit. And so it was really something to go to one of those peaks with a guy like that. Great experience. He had just come off of Everest, so when we got to base camp, he and Veka took off, ran up the peak, and then we never saw him again. Go ahead. So the first thing you do when you get to Pakistan is you get into the Karakoram range, and you have to hire porters. Obviously not Sherpa, these are Balti porters. So they all come together. You've got 80 miles to go. You've got to get all your gear up to base camp. Then you need porters to carry supplies for porters, and so on and so on. So you organize them, and it was really our first experience of big-time expedition. This is pretty benign terrain on the trek up to base camp. You're on ridges above the Indus River, which is a river that is just so massive and flows so strong that we came across a group of Grand Canyon kayakers who were scouting it to see if they could run it. And they were coming out as we were going up, and we said, well, how does it compare to the Grand Canyon? And they said, this river makes the Grand Canyon look like a ditch. And you're walking up sometimes in the river on the edges, and you can hear the boulders just conk, conk. I mean, it's just constant. The flow of it is, I mean, in certain points, it's as wide as the town of Aspen, and when you get up into those valleys, it's, you know, as wide as this tent. And it's just, it's the most incredible river I've ever seen. And it flows from the largest glaciated area outside of the poles, so it's got a lot of fuel for melt-off, especially this time of year, June, July, when we were going in. Okay. This is a typical river crossing. It's just on an old cable. You know, you've got, this wasn't the Indus, it was a tributary, but it was still very hairy. And all of this stuff, you can't really tell. And then on this side of it, I mean, there were sticks holding that thing together. There was fishing line. There was climbing rope. And you get out in the middle of this thing, and that's how they're pulling you across. And then when you look here, it's just baling wire holding you together. And Ed was on one side, and Steve was coming over here, and you couldn't hear anything because the river was so loud. And all of a sudden, Ed just starts acting. He just goes... And Steve just goes, oh my God, and he grabs onto this thing. Totally freaked out of his mind, and I got a picture of him, so. But it's, I mean, come on. Only in Pakistan. Okay. This is just kind of a nice shot climbing up on the peak. Go. We also had my main mentor in all of the climbing is a guy named Bob Slozen. And Bob Slozen is a local here. He's a great climber. Probably one of the most under-recognized alpinists in North America. The guy has just done so much. It's incredible. When we went to Denali, that was a guided trip. That was our first big mountain. We said, you know what? We need to get somebody that can show us the ropes. And Slow Man showed us the ropes, and in one trip he sent us on our way. And as a thank you for that, we said, you know what, why don't you come to Broad Peak with us? He loved Pakistan. He'd climbed Gasherbrum, and he had never climbed K2, and he had never climbed Broad Peak. And at that stage of the game, it was our first 8,000 meter peak. He said, okay, I'm not going to go to guide, but he said, I'll take you up on it. And he was just amazing. But it's hard to see with the light, but this is the glacier 3,000 feet below, and it's just, you know, the mountains are steep and beautiful, and that was one of our tents, and it was just a really fun route. Okay. That's Chogalisa, which is a peak that would be south. The Gasherbrums would be over here, The reason I put this in is because it's a beautiful 7,000 meter peak, but the whole Baltoro is lined with Pakistan Army bases, and on the other side it's lined with Indian bases because it's a main pass between India and Pakistan, and they've got this feud going that has been going for 50 years. And there was actually a female team climbing this peak, and the soldiers thought it would be funny to shoot some shells up there just to get their attention. And the base is literally right down here. But that's a whole nother subject, but people don't realize it. That war is almost exclusively due to mountaineering. Because right shortly before the first wars broke out, nobody was going into these valleys, and the Europeans started to take expeditions in there, and it was the gray area of Kashmir where they started to head in, and the Pakis said, well, we can get you guys up there. They saw the money, and then the Indians said, well, no, that's our territory. We can get you guys in there, and we want that business. So there became this internal war over tourism that literally, and I called BS on this, and then I started to talk to some of these colonels and stuff that I've become friends with in the Pakistani army through our liaison, and they said it's just absolutely ridiculous. Anyways, Pakistan is an amazing place, and I doubt if I'll ever get back there in my lifetime just due to the politics, but it's a beautiful place. Go. This is just climbing those upper slopes. That's steep. This was not a ski trip. And we were sitting around base camp while Ed was still there, and he just got up and he was just fed up. He said, I am so sick and tired of hearing you guys talk about not having skis. He said, you need to find an 8,000 meter peak, you need to get your skis, and you need to stop being babies about it, and you need to go and you need to do it. And then he walked out of the tent. So we went after him. We said, well, where should we go? He said, go to Shishapangma. Now, leave me alone. And that's the reason. I mean, we did. We got on that peak, and it's like there was some incredible skiing, and we didn't have our skis. And but you know what? Just in the natural progression, why would you go to your first 8,000 meter peak and take skis? You got to back up to 1990. AT gear was basically lighter rental gear that ski companies would put fancy top sheets on. You had heavy Silvretta bindings or worse, Petzl or Marker. And the ski boots, you basically skied this stuff in your climbing boots. And so it wasn't feasible to even contemplate it. Ed kind of changed our thought on that, and we thought, well, you know what, we'll give it a shot. So we got up, and we didn't top out on this. Go ahead. We got up to just under 26,000 feet, and we had a avalanche fracture line that chased us off. But it got us to above 25,000 feet. We almost got to 8,000 meters on it, and this is just looking down the glacier. This is the glacier we came up. This is a place called Concordia where the glacier splits. K2 is this way, Gasherbums are this way. When we went out, we went up this glacier, up through the Gondola La, over a pass that took us then back around to where we started. So we were definitely skiers. We definitely heeded Ed's advice, and by this was 1997. By 2000, we had formulated a plan to go to Shishapangma. So Shishapangma is the only 8,000 meter peak located solely in Tibet. This is the northeast ridge of Shishapangma. This is the central peak, and the main summit is over here. So this, you climb around down on gradual slopes behind this, and then you get on this ridge. And so when you get up here to right around 8,000 meters, you know, you've got some fifth class climbing. It was very exciting. So we put together a trip. We, the fall before we went, a legendary climber, Alex Lowe, and local David Bridges were climbing on the other side. And they unfortunately got killed in an avalanche, but they were trying to climb and ski from 8,000 meters. We had been planning our expedition long before we had ever heard about their expedition, and if you can believe it, that was my first introduction to the internet. I had a computer. Somebody said, you got to check out this expedition. I said, well, where? How? You couldn't research anything. Oh, go online. Go online, what does that mean? So somebody came over and got me hooked up online, and I went to this website, mountainzone.com, and started reading about their expedition. And until that point, I had no idea. I mean, you could get bibs and bobs of information about Europeans that had been skiing those high peaks. I mean, this is long before skiing Everest. I mean, we had no idea that nobody from America or the Western Hemisphere had ever skied from above 8,000 meters. We were just a bunch of young guys that said, you know what, we should have had skis on Broad Peak. We need to take them to Shishapangma. And so we didn't know what to expect. People would literally just laugh at us. We had too little experience to understand what we were trying to take on, but enough experience to know that we could go and we could have success, at least climbing the peak. So climbing the 8,000 meter peak became the main goal, and we just thought, well, we'll take the skis and we'll see how we do. And so we, the year before, we went to a 7,000 meter peak called Lenin in Tajikistan, and we befriended a bunch of Kazakh climbers that were just climbing there and guiding another group, and we became good friends. One was a guy named Maksut Zayemev, and Maksut has since gone on to become legendary in the same light that Anatoly Bukriv from the same climbing club was famous, and he ended up climbing all the 8,000 meter peaks without oxygen and became the youngest Kazakh to climb an 8,000 meter peak with us when he climbed the central peak. He was not skiing, but we were skiing. But the reason I bring it up is because we formed a great friendship with those guys, and it allowed us to raise money through American Adventure Productions, which is a John Wilcox company based out of Aspen, and we fueled the money in to bring them to Shishapangma. They did a film on us, and that's how we got the money to get to Shishapangma. Go ahead. So the lower slopes of Shishapangma are a ski tour. It was really fun skiing. It was not typical high altitude skiing. It was some pretty good turns, and we had a lot of snow. So just working our way up the mountain. Go. This is Jim coming up some of the lower slopes. So we had to ski across all of this glacier, and then we had a pilot camp here, and then advanced base camp was down around there. So it's a typical Tibet 8,000 meter peak, very long route. We're at about 21,000 feet where this picture was taken, and that was our Camp 1. Go. Had a lot of snow on that trip. It's a big avalanche peak, so we had to be extremely careful with it. These pictures are actually transferred from slides, so some of the color is not perfect. And this was back when I was taking a lot of these photos. After this trip, the cameraman the cameraman that they assigned to film us got sick, and they stuck a video camera in my hand, and I haven't taken stills since 2000. I've just concentrated on the video. Go ahead. So we established the mountain, and we got up to about 22,000 feet. And from 22,000 feet, you have to climb up to a ridge, and this is where typically a high camp is put. The first lesson we learned about carrying skis in the 8,000 meter arena is that setting up those camps and carrying the skis is really, really difficult. And what we came to in the year 2000, and we haven't used high camps on any 8,000 meter peak, just because when you're carrying skis that's roughly 20 to 30 pounds of gear, which is a typical load, it just extends the trip. It takes extra days to haul all that gear up there, and then you got to haul it all off, and it's not fun skiing with loads, so we just avoid high camps, and this was really a test where we proved that. And so this is our summit bid. We got up at midnight, climbed up to this camp, and then we kept going. Jim, at this point, was not sure if he could make it. He dumped the skis, and he said, I just have to go for the summit. This is Steve. He said, I have no interest in climbing this without skis, and if I get up there, I'm gonna stand on skis. So he fired me up. I was honestly getting ready to dump the skis because we're above 7,000 meters, and it's, you know, you can see that there's some sun there, but there was definitely a big storm coming in. But he and I kept on going, and we carried the skis on up. So this is getting onto that steep, gnarly ridge. Go ahead. This is a picture coming up some of the rock and stuff. There was a lot of fixed line in there, but we didn't know who set it, so we kind of just climbed around it and just did the best that we could. So this is getting up a little bit higher on the peak, approaching probably 7,500 meters. Go ahead. So this is climbing. This is actual one of the good shots that didn't fade, and it's just typical terrain up on that ridge. It's steep, and we had a good amount of snow, and it was crusty. It had avalanche 2 days before we got up there, and so we felt pretty confident that it was safe, and it was pretty safe snowpack for us. But Steve didn't like the pace, and he said, you know what, let me go in front. And he broke trail up that entire ridge, carrying skis, which was really a remarkable thing. Go ahead. So we're getting up to what they call the Deacon's Post, which is at about 7,600 meters, and we took a break, and this is just looking out over the Langtang area that's all of Tibet. We're in Tibet, but we're on the border of Nepal and Tibet, so behind us is Nepal, and that's all Tibet. Go. This is, it's kind of hard to see in the light, but this is Choyo-Yu, and then we've got Everest and Lhotse behind that. In the clouds, you can see a storm is coming, and the storm came in very, very quick. Go ahead. So this is climbing up past that tower. We've got the central summit in our gun sight in the film. I actually have a recording of me at base camp. I got on the radio and said we're about an hour and a half from the top. Steve and I still have the skis, and it's getting pretty blustery, but we're going to go for it. We were pretty safe, even though it turned out to be a whiteout. We're on a definitive ridge, and so we knew we couldn't really get too far off track. Go ahead. So this is just inching our way up. Then the last hurdle is this section of rock, which involves some fifth class climbing. And we climbed that without belay. And then coming back down, we had to take the skis off, and we had to rappel that. And we did have a rope, but we found some old fixed line and just retied it and made sure that it was okay. Go. So these are two shots that I took. I put the video camera away and I took these, and these have never been published. Nobody's ever really seen them. This is Steve heading up the prayer flags of the central summit are right here. And so Steve is just making his last steps up there. He's got his skis on the pack, and you know, from a historical perspective, nobody from South America or North America had ever taken skis to this point. I mean, as far as North American high altitude skiing went, Fritz had the record at 24,000 feet in the 70s, and so we were, you know, not making a high altitude ski record at this stage, but from an American perspective and from a Western Hemisphere perspective, these were fairly historic steps up to the top. Go ahead. And he finally got up there, and he took his pack off, and he's sitting on the central summit. Now we got up to the prayer flags, and the main summit is about 10 or 15 feet higher, and it's a quarter mile over here. It had not been, from the central peak over to the main peak had not been climbed, including by Visters, for a 4 or 5 year period. It was a double crevasse thing. And we thought, well, you know, we've got some pickets, and you know, we wanted to give it a go, but it was a whiteout, horrendous wind. You can see the wind in the film. And so we got up there. It was above 8,000 meters, and you know what? Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, and on top of that, we had come from 22,000 feet all the way to above 26,000 feet for our first 8,000 meter peak. And considering nobody had ever even come close to hauling skis on a summit bid for that many vertical feet, we were ready to get the heck out of there and go back to the tent and get some coffee. So it was a whiteout, and there was no real great photos of skiing or anything. Not that the skiing was worth taking pictures of anyways. It was very, steep and crusty, and on top of that, Maxut and Jim were not on skis, so Steve would ski down, they would walk down, and then I would, we just wanted to make sure we got off. We got off. The next day, a couple of Austrians got up to that 7,500 meter mark, that tower, and were almost swept off the mountain in an avalanche from the storm that we were escaping. So it's an example of, those mountains. It's hard to make comparisons. The two Austrians, and I can't remember their names, were, as old as I am now. They had incredible experience. They were, far superior as far as climbing and skiing at altitude because they were a lot older than us. Yet these punks from Aspen go up there and they pull it off, and then the very next day they almost get avalanched off. So it's just an example. It's a sport, but it's not a sport. There's not white lines that define it. A matter of hours can completely change your ability to get up or not get up those things. Okay. So this is the group, and we flew the Kazakhstan flag because we didn't have an American flag with us. So we had them on our sleeves, but we just, anyways. And this is Maxut, who is just a legend in mountaineering now. So anyways, we got off of Shishapangma. We were pretty excited about that. We decided before we got off of Shishapangma that we would go to North Everest. And North Everest, all of the footage is footage and it's not photos, so I don't have pictures of that. But it was a big team. We went there in 2003, and we got up to the North Col, and we got stuck in a 30-day windstorm. And so we ended up skiing from above 25,000 feet on the North Ridge, which was a really great experience, but we still didn't have that fix that we needed. And the other thing that I forgot to mention is that when we did Shishapangma, it was absolutely pure. We did not use any supplemental oxygen. We had no Sherpa porters. We didn't use any altitude drugs. And with the exception of one rappel on a fixed line that we refixed, we didn't use any fixed line. It was almost an alpine type ascent. And we realized that we wanted to use that style, which really is the benchmark of elite mountaineering. Not that we considered ourselves to be elite, but we wanted to aspire to that. And we knew that, well, if Reinhold Messner can climb Everest without oxygen, there's no reason for us to mess with our style that we use right here in Colorado. And that became a big driving force for the way that we would continue to climb. So we failed on Everest. We did ski from above 25,000 feet. We were the first Americans to ski that North Ridge. And then by 2007, we formulated a project to go back to North Everest, but we wanted to acclimate on a different peak. So next slide. So we decided that we would go in May 2007, and we would attempt to climb and ski Cho-Oyu, which is, I believe, the 4th highest peak in the world. It's right at about 27,000 feet, and it's just right up the face. When we got there, it was a little bit of a disappointment. It's not typically the snowy season in the spring, and you can see that there's not a lot of skiing in here. But as we started working the mountains, we got more and more snow, and so we gained confidence as we went along. The goal was obviously to climb it and ski from as high as possible, but the main goal was still Everest. Go ahead. So this is climbing above Camp 1 on Cho-Oyu. Go ahead. And Cho-Oyu it's a great route. It's got varying terrain. You start out, it's a typical Tibet 8,000 meter peak. You've got a long, probably 10 to 15 mile trek from base camp to advanced base camp. Then you've got some steep talus slopes, then you've got some gentle snow slopes, and then you've got a few ice steps. And so you got to negotiate these. And so for the first haul, you know, we're not acclimated, and we're going from roughly 20,000 feet up to Camp 2, which is at about 7,000 meters. So it's a long haul, and this was actually one of the hardest days I've ever had in the mountain, getting from Camp 1 to Camp 2 with full loads, just because you had steep terrain, and we didn't really expect that, and it's slow, and you're out there and you're exposed, but it was really fun. And I can remember when I was climbing that face, I'm just thinking, oh my God, this is what I paid for. This is so incredible. It was tiring, but it was great. Go. And it's just kind of some of the shots that Steve and Jim took. That's actually me in between a couple of ledges, a couple of steps. So, and that kind of gives you perspective. This is, Steve took this picture of Jim, and then that's actually a camera person, another local, Sherry Silvera, way down the ridge. So, you know, fun, steep terrain. The next objective became getting up through the yellow band. There's a yellow band on Everest. There's a yellow band on Chautauqua. In the fall season, this would all be snow, and it would be a moderate, steep snow climb. But in the spring, it was obviously not skiable. It was just snow on top of talus, and it was, oh my God, it was ridiculously tough climbing, and we're heading up towards 8,000 meters. Go ahead. So that's some of the lower slopes on it. Go. And finally, you break out at just below 8,000 meters, and you can see, and I didn't notice this when I was up there, but in the better climbing season for Chautauqua, which is the autumn, this is a snow picket that was driven in up to the last few inches to set a fixed line down the yellow band. And you can see that there's not a lot of snow. I mean, you couldn't tie off on that right now. It was just barely stuck in the ice. So the snow blows off and it melts, and it's not an ideal time to be there, but we had enough snow to get going. It just made for, you know, it made something that normally is not a difficult climb just a lot harder than we expected. Go ahead. And that's Steve on the summit, Lhotse and Everest in the background. Go ahead. And so then we had to ski down. We're excited. It's getting us ready for Everest. And so the next series of pictures are just heading down Chautauqua. We became the 5th people in history to have multiple ski descents from above 8,000 meters, and the first Americans to do that on this trip. So the goal and the goal setting and all that kind of stuff, honestly, for Jimmy, Steve, and I, it never comes into the equation. We find out about a lot of this stuff after the fact. I mean, I had no idea how many people skied multiple times from 8,000 meters, and then somebody points it out, and you go, oh, wow, that's kind of neat. It just has never been part of our deal, simply because it's so hard to go and climb these things, and there's so much luck involved that you go trying to have a good trip, and whatever happens, happens. And you know, even when you look at like Messner, I mean, people don't realize it, but in the 8,000 meter arena, I mean, his success rate is around 40%. And so there's just so many times that you go to those peaks when you're going pure style that you don't have success defined by what modern pop culture mountaineering defines it, which is just a summit. So if you set your sights on the summit, you're more 60% of the time you're going to be disappointed. So it's a fun factor. It's a natural progression. It's really totally respecting those mountains and understanding that, you know, we're putting a lot of time and energy into something, and that summit is really a long shot. And then you get successful with stuff, and it's just icing on the cake. So this series of this expedition was a great example of that. We go to Chautauqua, have great success. One of the hardest mental things I've ever had to get through was seeing people going home from Chautauqua, knowing that I still had to go to North Everest, which was really difficult, because you get done climbing and skiing an 8,000 meter peak and you just want to go home. But we refueled in a little town called Tingry for a week, and then we went back and we found ourselves back at the north base camp of Mount Everest. So we made the long 15-mile trek, go ahead, back up to advanced base camp. And this is 2007. We were on the route in 2003, and in the film there's this, you know, it's not staged. I'm filming Steve, and he looks back at Jim. He goes, "I am not kidding you. I remember specific rocks." It's just, it was day, you go up and down this trail so much, and it was just like we had never left. So we got up there, and this is just heading on the glacier below the North Col at 21,000 feet roughly. Go ahead. And this is just heading up to the North Col, which is 7,000 meters. Go ahead. And this is a very commercialized route. There's fixed lines, and we try not to use fixed lines as much as possible, but on this trip we broke our ethics just a little bit. It's pretty rare that most people would go and attempt 2 8,000 meter peaks in the same expedition, let alone Everest being one of them. And so we had a Sherpa that helped us. Norbu Sherpa helped us on both of the peaks, and we used the fixed lines. We still went without oxygen and all the other stuff, but we had our hands full, and so we definitely used the fixed lines, and we were on the trade route. But it was still a beautiful trip, and this is just climbing up to the North Col. Go ahead. That's Steve arriving at the North Col, so we're at 7,000 meters here. So 23,000 feet. Go ahead. So this is the North Ridge. And you get to this camp and you look up here and it just looks like a nice snow ramp. Doesn't look like that big of a deal. It's kind of out of the picture up here. But you can barely see dots. It's totally deceiving. It's you're going from 23 up to 25, and it just goes on and on and on. And in 2003, when we climbed it, it was a sheet of ice. And I can remember being on the fixed line in my skis, and we're debating, you know, should we clip into the fixed line? And I just put my head down and I said, I can do this. And I skied it. And in retrospect, it was probably one of the stupidest risks that I've ever taken in my life. Was okay, but, you know, move the calendar up now to 2007, and we got up here and we had soft snow. So we weren't sure if we could get the summit. We gave it a shot. Go ahead. This is looking down. So you can see it's a long way back down to that camp. You've got some steep rolls. You can imagine that these, you know, even though they're only 100 or 200 feet long, if they're ice, you know, you're falling off this side a few thousand feet, or this side. It's with ice. It was just not a very intelligent thing to do. With soft snow, it's a different story. Go ahead. So this is passing a guy that I thought we might have to rescue, but he said, no, I'm just sitting here, and he ran out of oxygen, and then a Sherpa gave him some more, and he was fine. So we're just climbing up through the rocks on the North Ridge. Go ahead. And this was our camp at 27,000 feet. So the face is steep. It's really fun. It's beautiful. I wouldn't say it's technical until you get up to the steps, but it's steep, and you really got to pay attention. And it's on, you know, talus slopes. The big bummer for us though was when we got up there, much above this, above 26,000 feet, there just wasn't enough snow to ski. So we decided, well, there's no skiing. We know we're going to get another ski of the North Ridge, and we set off wishing that we had climbing boots, but we had our AT boots. Got up to 27,000, got up the next morning and started climbing, and we got up to the Northeast Ridge at about 28,000 feet. Go ahead, I think there's another. You can see this is the terrain, so that's the camp way down there. So this is the north face of Everest. And we got up to the north face at about 28,000 feet, up to the where the steps start, and in the ski boots, my feet started to freeze. And what had happened is the logistics guy that we were with, he said, oh, if you guys are climbing without oxygen, you need to be on the trail by 10 o'clock. And we thought, well, that's just ridiculous. I mean, we're going to be a little slower, but we're not going to be that slow. And on top of it, it was about 20 below zero up there, which is super, super cold, even for Everest. And so we started at 10 o'clock, and we got up to the Northeast Ridge, and it was only, 3 or 4 in the morning. And I have a feeling that if we'd have started when everybody else started, and we got up there when the sun was coming over that ridge, it would have been a different story. But I'm really lucky that I made the decision, because I never get cold feet in those mountains. And I got back to camp and got back to my tent. It was, still dark, and my feet didn't freeze, but I had no feeling in my toes for a good 6 months after that. And for a good year or 2 after that, really had problems with the cold. So I didn't freeze them, I didn't lose any flesh or anything. But it was a learning experience, and it's just the combination of climbing in ski boots and not having supplemental oxygen at those altitudes. And thank God I had the wherewithal to turn around. So here again, you've got the luck of getting a climb and a ski on Chautauqua, and then you come over to Everest, which is your main goal, and you don't make it for the second time. And you justify it with things. You look at John Ross Skelly didn't climb Everest without oxygen in his career, and then at age 50 went and climbed it with oxygen. And you look at even Ed Viesturs, he didn't climb Everest without oxygen. It took him, after the 3rd attempt, he finally made it. And you can go down the list. Everest has a reputation as being an easy peak because of the way that it's been engineered to be climbed, with armies of Sherpa and supplemental oxygen and drugs that make it a lot easier. And even within the scope of really the biggest, what I refer to as a crutch, the supplemental oxygen, even when I started climbing, you'd go to these base camps and you would climb as far as you could without oxygen. And the guides would push you. You're not going to use oxygen until you need it. And when you need it, we're not going to just crank it up to full. And they would give you a certain amount of oxygen. And they would say, okay, this is what we think you need. Don't abuse this, because if you get up there and you run out, that's it. They didn't have armies of Sherpa hauling oxygen just for you. Whereas when you look at the commercialization of Everest now, and it's totally unregulated, there's no ethics even within the ethics of climbing with some of the perks like supplemental oxygen. They've designed high flow oxygen masks now so that you literally crank it up as high as your body can take it, and that they're so tight that you have to be careful about using too much oxygen. Don't ask me how that works, but that's the issue now. So it's completely flip-flopped. And so what has happened in those peaks is you have tremendous volume. And on the popular peaks like Manaslu, Everest, Chautauqua, and now even K2, you've got a scenario where there's no regulation. These guides, the big guide companies, are making millions of dollars. And you get a scenario where it's get them up, get them out. And when you look at the avalanche catastrophe on Everest last year, and you look at the reality, we've completely eliminated the common sense of the mountains. And the best example that I can say is you've got 2,000 people down here, and you've got 36 Sherpa up here standing shoulder to shoulder under a known Serac avalanche path. And my inclination is, well, whatever happened to going one at a time, and why isn't somebody down at base camp getting on a radio saying, spread out? And so what happens? The worst thing happens. You've got this massive group of Sherpa that's being forced up there by this massive group of commercial climbers, and the thing goes, and we lose the Sherpa. So the 8,000 meter peaks and these popular peaks have just become super undesirable. I mean, I would love to go and climb and ski Mount Everest pure style, but it's impossible now. And before the accident happened, there were two climbers, Uli Steck and Simone Marolts, who were on the south route, and they were trying to climb it pure style. And when they went up and tried to get around the porters are now the next generation. They don't understand these ethics any better than anybody. And they got into a big rock fight. And they said, you can't climb ahead of us. These are the rules. I mean, everybody agreed that we were going to set the fixed lines and you're going to knock stuff down on us. So it became impossible. They had to turn around. So where I'm going with this is not a judgment of ethics in climbing, but really just stating the fact that I have an ethic for myself. I don't care how people climb. But the bummer for me is that it makes it really difficult to go back and try and finish this. So what do you do? What do you do as a mountaineer with a desire to go and climb, you know, to really stretch your 25 years of experience to just slowly natural progress it? And those popular peaks are not a reality for us anymore. So go ahead. These are just a couple of shots of us skiing down the North Ridge. We had a great trip. Go ahead. It was fun. Didn't ski from the summit, but we still had this passion. Go ahead. And this is the North Col is right above us here. So it got one summit, didn't get the other one. Go ahead. And came off of it. If you go back and you look at the last 15 or 20 years, there's maybe 2 years where on those popular peaks there were not accidents somewhere that resulted in single accident tragedies with death counts by the dozen. So go ahead. So what do you do if you're in our position and you don't want to go and you don't want to deal with trash and crowds and bodies and so forth? Well, we came up with an idea. Well, you know what? If we want to go to those 8,000 meter peaks, we got to go in the winter. And going to the 8,000 meter peaks in the winter is something that was started by the Poles in the 80s. And from the 80s until today, there have been roughly just a little less than 30 winter expeditions. You're dealing with intense cold. You're dealing with intense wind from the jet stream being lower in the Himalaya. And so consequently, the only people that you see going into the winter Himalaya are the absolute elite climbers in the history of the sport. Well, we didn't consider ourselves to be the absolute elite people in the history of the sport. So we said, you know what, we better get our ass in gear and we better get out there and we better go start taking on some of these 6,000 and 7,000 meter peaks in the same style that we're going to need to climb those. And we need to start stretching ourselves and we need to start seeing what we're capable of before we get ourselves into that environment. So we came up with a plan shortly after 2007 where we decided eventually we wanted to go to the Himalaya in the winter. And the idea was we need to go to South America and we need to go to some 7,000 meter peaks and we need to start doing these flash type ascents to see how our bodies do at extreme altitude and to see what we're capable of. So we thought, well, okay, let's go to South America. We found this peak, which is Corapuna, which is in Peru. It's a 21,000 foot peak in Peru out on the Atacama Desert. It had been climbed and skied on this side, but this is the Barraco route, and nobody had climbed it, let alone skied it, until the week before we got there, and some Poles actually climbed it, but they didn't ski it. So we thought, well, we'll go there, and let's see if we can do a 5,000 foot day, up to above 20,000 feet. So we went to Corapuna, go ahead, and established some of our camps. Go ahead. And it was a beautiful peak, no beta, no trails, nobody, you know, the Poles had been there, nobody had been to this side. These people in this little farming village had never even seen people with white skin until the Poles got there, and that really scared them, and then we were a little bit tanner. Go ahead. And then we just went and climbed it and really pushed ourselves and realized that, you know, we can carry the skis unacclimated and we can, you know, we can really go for it. And the reason you have to be able to do that in the winter in the Himalayas because the windows are so small. You don't have the ability to set a bunch of camps up. You have to be able to just go from base camp, get as high as you can, and get the heck out. And you have to just expose yourself as little as possible. Go ahead. So this is coming up on the summit, out on the Atacama Desert, just beautiful. Nothing technical, nothing too major, but really good climbing and really good skiing. Go ahead. So that's on the summit. And we realized that we could do it. Go ahead. So we had some good skiing. That obviously isn't a great ski shot, but I've got some pretty good footage. Go ahead. So we got that done, and we thought, well, okay, what are we going to do next? We had attempted to climb a peak called Chimborazo, which is the highest peak in Ecuador and the highest peak on the equator. We had tried to climb this in our Everest, what I refer to as the Everest years. And if you looked at the guidebooks in the 80s, these were all beautiful snow slopes. It was a very popular peak like Rainier. It had a lot of crowds on it. And the combination of global warming and volcanoes in the area covered it with a sheet of dust, and the snow started to melt, and this is all just unskiable ice. And these are all ice ledges. It looks like rock, but it's ice ledges. We got there, and we were expecting from these beautiful pictures in the guidebooks to have just top to bottom skiing. We got there, and there was nobody there, and it was just this ugly 21,000 foot peak with just, you know, couldn't even get ice screws into the ice because the ice had so much pumice in it, it would just take the points right off. So we didn't climb it. So then we decided we'd go back with a little bit more oomph in our equipment, and we tried it again, and we got iced out, just couldn't get the ice screws in. So we thought, well, we still want to do it. You know, this would be a good one. It's about 7,000 feet from the bottom of the mountain to the top. And, you know, let's just go try and do it. We'll carry the skis. And we found some really good titanium screws. And, you know, this is significantly further in our evolution as climbers and skiers. So we got there, and it must have been about 2010 or 11, after 2 previous attempts. And experience is really a great thing, and it was, you know, pretty exposed, but we didn't have to protect any of it, and we were able to climb up it. And so it had been skied from this peak, which is not the main peak. And so we thought, well, we got to get to the main peak, and that'll give us a really good test. Go ahead. So you can't really see it here. Jesse Durrance was with us on this trip. This is climbing some of the steep ice, which was, you know, it was very exciting, especially doing it at night. Go ahead. And then we got up onto the dome, and we just totally lucked out with conditions. More often than not, this is just a big field of penitentes at 35 or 40 degrees, and we just had this perfect glaze of not powder, but a light little crust and not too much ash, and we got up it. Yep. So we got to the main summit, which I'm standing on, where Steve was standing on, where he took the picture. And then normally, there's a huge crevasse right here that prevents people from getting to the summit. But even that was filled in, and we were able to get up to that main summit. But here again, it's you know, there's no white lines in climbing. I mean, 9 out of 10 people that try this peak can't get the main summit because it's impossible to get over this Bergschrund, and we just walked right over it. Go ahead. So that's Steve on the summit. And we were just, I mean, 7,000 feet to 21,000 feet carrying the skis, unacclimated. I mean, we were gassed. We were just, but you know, we're testing ourselves. We're trying to see what we can get away with. Go ahead. And I think that's Jesse skiing down off of the sub-summit. Go ahead. And that's Jim Guile. And it's hard to tell with the light, but you can see some of the little ranches. I mean, the plains down below, they're close to 15 or 16,000 feet below where we're skiing. You know, the base of the peak is higher, but this is looking way out over the plains of Ecuador. It was exciting. I mean, it was just, you're on this high volcano. You're further away from the center of the earth than you are when you're on top of Everest. But we had really good skiing, and it was a great trip, but we were just at the end of our rope when we got done. Go. So then a couple years later, we had gone and we had gotten a first ski descent off of a peak called Norjung Konsang, which is a 7,000 meter peak in Tibet. And the next year we decided that, you know what, we need to get another huge, huge day. And Illimani was a peak that, here again, we tried to climb 16 years before, had 1 or 2 attempts since then, and Bolivia is just the land of perfect climbing, and for one reason or another, in 3 attempts, something always happened. So Steve, Jimmy, and I got in an airplane, and we thought, well, let's just go finish it. We had heard that it had good snow. More often than not, these slopes are just ice, and we had heard from somebody that there was snow, so we cashed in miles, jumped on an airplane, and the route starts way down in the valley, follows this ridge, and you're actually starting over here. So with the up and down and then the up, it was 9,000 feet of climbing to over 21,000 feet. Go ahead. So obviously climbing at night, and this is up on the snow slopes past they call it the Stairway to Heaven, which is the rock climbing portion of it, the trail up the rocks. Go ahead. And just climbing through the morning hours, and go ahead. Just beautiful terrain. Bolivia is probably my favorite place on the planet to climb. Go ahead. Beautiful surrounding glaciers. Okay. And finally, we made the summit. So a little over 10 hours to get from the valley down below up to the summit, and it's just, you get up there and your head's spinning. You know, on this one we did acclimate to about 17 or 18,000 feet. We hauled the skis up, went back down, rested a few days, and then just went from the base camp all the way to the top and then all the way down. Had never been climbed and skied in a single day, and it was a first American descent of that peak, if you can believe that. You know, and this was in 2013, and second descent of the peak ever. I mean, this is a fairly major peak. It's not a incredible, you know, feather for mountaineering just in and of itself. It gets climbed by a lot of guided parties, but to go and climb it in a single push and to ski it takes something that is not so incredible and makes it something that, you know, is really fun. Go ahead. So this is on the summit, and then just behind him is a peak called Sahama, which is a 22,000 foot peak that we had skied years before, which is the highest peak in Bolivia. So it was neat to get up there and see that peak out there. Go ahead. So that's just skiing down the summit ridge. Go ahead. And this is getting from the summit ridge over the Bergschrund, which here again, most times is, you know, a fairly involved procedure, and it was covered with snow this time. Go. Just skiing down. Go. And this is really I can't tell if you're looking at it straight on, but you can see the valley down here in the photo, and you can look at this picture at 8kpeak.com. We've got it up. But it's just, when you're at this stage of the game and you've got slopes like this, and it's 21,000 feet, and you know you've just had the biggest, it sounds funny, but even after skiing all those 7,000 and 8,000 meter peaks, this, in my mind, this is the crown jewel for me personally, because to haul skis for 9,000 feet to 21,000 feet and to luck out with nearly perfect ski conditions and to pull it off, it was just really a personal satisfaction that I've you know, Shishapang obviously was very satisfying, but this was just really, it was just such a special, awesome weather, perfect conditions, everything went right, and it just doesn't happen in the mountains all the time where you just, there's always something wrong, and this was just one of those perfect days. So that's the end of the training. I don't have any pictures of the winter stuff. We've spent the last 4 years climbing and skiing on a peak called Mustagata in northwestern China, which has never been climbed in the winter. It's the summit sees temperatures minus 100 and base camp is minus 50, and we gave it a good shot for 3 attempts, and we got a world record high altitude ski from about 19,000 feet and had enough of Mustagata, which is a very benign ski tour. I mean, I would recommend it to a lot of people in Aspen in season, but in the winter it's just beyond cold. But the satisfaction that you get, the way I describe it is it's the most miserable alpine experience that you can possibly have, but it's the most satisfying and the most fun. And we thought, well, let's go try and find another peak more in the range. I mean, that peak gets blasted with snow from the 5 greatest ranges, so it's a wind scenario as well as cold. And we thought we can handle the cold. On the last trip to Mustagata, I literally looked behind me and Steve is cartwheeling with a full pack across the face, and then I got blown off my feet. I mean, and it sounds really funny, you don't get a summit. We didn't even ski on that trip. And it was one of the biggest accomplishments of my life, just getting from 20,000 feet down to base camp in winds like that, because it gave us the confidence to know, you know what, we can survive when it's 50 below zero, and we can survive in 110 mile an hour winds, and we can go and find a peak that's buried in the range, and we can continue to go, and we can push ourselves into the Himalaya. And so last January, we found ourselves on a peak called Himlung, and had great conditions. You know, here again, super cold, not as windy as Mustagata. Got up to 21,000 feet and had a 60-degree head wall to get up. And obviously you can't ski on ice, and it's pretty hard to ski on 60-degree hard snow. But we still wanted to climb it, and when we went to put the ice screws in, it was so cold that the ice screws wouldn't go into the ice. And so we would take our axe and try and put holes in it, and I had heard of ice so hard and so cold that you couldn't climb it or penetrate it, and I didn't believe it, and we found that. When you take your ice axe or your tool and you hit it on the ice and it just bounces off, we thought that the ice screws were dull or something, and you could not get an ice screw in that ice. And it wasn't skiable, and we were cold. So we put the skis on at 21,000 and had a good ski, but the training and the evolution that we've had, I'll never go back to the Himalayan normal season again. It's just to be there in the winter, as miserable as it is, there's no people, there's no posturing, there's no commercialism. And I'm not saying that commercialism is bad, it's great. I mean, not everybody has been doing this for 25 years, and so there's rhyme and reason for everything. Just for us, for Steve, Jimmy, and I, at age 50, we like to just go for a little bit different type of experience in that winter, the winter aspect of the Himalaya. To be there all alone, to be pushing yourself in that environment is not necessarily a great mountaineering achievement, but it's a personal achievement and a satisfaction that just keeps us fired up. That'll be part of a film that's coming out. That's the reason why I can't show any of the photos or anything. But anyways, that's my story. It's a huge, we're proud to play a huge role in that history that I think the mayor is trying to capture with this AT initiative. A lot of people have said this is not a great place for an AT environment because the snow is so dangerous, but in the springtime, it's been a pretty damn good base camp for my brother and Jim and I, and so we support that, and we've got the heritage and the history that backs that up, and in my view, even more than some of these other places in Chamonix. You don't really have, in Europe, Chamonix and some of these other places, you really do have a rich history here, and so we're proud to contribute to that.
Thank you so much, Mike. Questions? Yes?
Have you devised some of your own equipment to?
Yeah, we have. I mean, especially for the
skis that you can climb in and then ski in.
Yeah, I mean, for the winter stuff, that's the reason why it's been a 4-year process. I mean, you get there and it's that cold, and so we tried, you know, we tried to find heated insoles, and nothing worked. And then you find something that does work, and then, you know, that worked, but it still wasn't warm enough, so you modify climbing boots with cuffs and down suits. I mean, ironically, the down suits that we were given by one company were too warm. because you would sweat too much, and then that intense 60 below cold, it's tough to deal with that and dissipate that heat. So we had to modify suits and ironically get rid of the Gore-Tex materials and just go to straight nylon with super high quality down. Face gear we've had to modify. I mean, we've had to modify the stoves, the starters for the stoves, wax. We've had to come up with cold weather wax. On Himlung, it was, I don't know how cold it was. My thermometer buried at 30 and it was probably 50 or 60 and the skis wouldn't slide. And so it's exciting. Climbing in the Himalaya in the winter is a completely different sport. You take that 25 years that got you there, and it's like starting over. So yeah, a lot of modifications. Tents. Can't use single wall tents when it's 60 below zero. You get in the tent and it's 20 below, and you can't boil your water. So you have to carry the heavy double wall tents, because if you don't, you got to drink. So stuff like that.
What if you comment on the effect of climate change in your climbing experience?
Oh, I mean, it's drastic. It's, when you look at the glaciers, especially in South America, having been there 15, 16 years ago and then going back, the receding glaciers is a huge issue. But right here in our backyard, I mean, if you go up to Castle Peak, when I was a kid, just getting into this stuff, there was you go up the main snow head wall, which technically is a glacier, and then it flattens out. Well, that used to be about 150 or 200 feet higher, and there was a lake in the top of it. Now, that is completely, the ice under the rock has melted out, and that lake is now, it's maybe not 200 feet, but all of 100 feet lower than it was when I was a kid. And then you also see where the ice is pulling away. I mean, you have little bergschrunds up there. You never saw any of that stuff. But in Bolivia and some of these places in South America, Ecuador, I mean, in my life, there may not be glaciers on Chimborazo.
I was going to ask if you have grandchildren, would your grandchildren be able to do what you're doing?
Not on some peaks, which is really, you know, I mean, I don't lose sleep over it, but it bums me out. I mean, I try to do my part to not contribute to it, so.
What do you consider the peak in a climber's life? I mean, as far as age, is 50, like, are you a better climber at 50 than you were at 30?
Yeah, I mean, I really lucked out. I mean, I was just looking. I had to get the gear out of the Colorado Ski Museum that I used to ski Shishapangma. And when I picked that gear up, I looked at it and I thought, it's just amazing that we didn't get killed. It was literally rental gear with top skins that the companies would put on it. It was soft, it didn't hold, the boots were terrible. So we hit it just right, because we started out with that heavy, lousy gear. And if you would have, I was just posting on Wild Snow the other day with Lou Dawson. I mean, if you'd have asked me 20 years ago if I'd still be going to the Himalaya in the winter at age 50, I would have laughed. But we caught the wave of the evolution of the gear. And so what I've lost in power, I've been able to make up the difference because the gear is so much lighter and so much better. And it's kind of like John Ross Kelly. He's one of the greatest climbers in the history of climbing. He can't get up Mount Everest without oxygen. He turns 50 with oxygen. He laughed at it. He said it was just so easy. Well, I'm riding that wave. I've got light gear. It's keeping me in the game. My endurance is better. But the big thing is you just have so much more experience. I mean, my haul bag on Shishapangma, I went over there with 200 or 300 pounds of gear. If I go to an 8,000 meter peak now, I mean, I'm taking less than 100 pounds. It's just the gear is lighter and you become more efficient and you just understand what you're capable of. Don't have the power. Endurance is still pretty good. So I got into it at the right time.
Go ahead.
When Fritz Stamberger disappeared in Pakistan, do we know, is there anything known whether he was on skis?
He was not on skis.
They found him eventually?
They did not find him. But that's a very interesting story.
Yeah, but why, I mean, how do we know that he was not on skis? Because he started out to go on skis. Right?
Well, he was in Pakistan. That was a different trip than the one I was talking about, and he didn't have skis with him.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But that's an interesting story. And there was a rumor that he actually was captured and assassinated as a spy. And I thought the same thing. And I was actually doing a movie on it. And the only reason I didn't finish the movie is because I couldn't substantiate a lot of it.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of European, American-based climbers with passports that were doing that back then. And I actually came across a guy that claims he saw the dossier. So is it true? I don't know. But I went from being totally skeptical to thinking, you know what? Until we know, we don't know. It's a mystery. And I would have done a film on it, but I just couldn't get enough substantiation. I mean, it's all hearsay. So it's interesting, though, and it's wild to think about it. But the point about Fritz is that he's another guy that was just so talented. And he did so many amazing things, but he never got the breaks that his brothers and contemporaries got in Europe. And he was so amazing. I mean, he's just an inspiration to me. And I didn't know Fritz. I met him, but I didn't know him. But what he was doing when he was doing it was, you know, I know the guy through passion. Go ahead.
Can you explain why you were climbing and doing things at night? Is it because of the weather? Or?
Yeah, I mean, you have to. It's a lot better to be climbing when you're fresh at night than it is to start out in the light and be tired coming out in the dark. And so you want to get an early jump on the day. Plus conditions, it's colder, the snow is safer. So you do a lot of the climbing at night.
Mike, can you, when you talk about the sort of the contribution of this area to the annals of climbing and all the great climbers that have come out of here, can you speculate is it just happenstance, or is there something about this place that sort of breeds that type of person?
There's no doubt that Fritz and Roach and all the other guys, they were attracted to Aspen, not just because, for one reason and one reason only. The mountains are so accessible, and I mean they're beautiful. If you go up here on the trail up here, I'm fourth generation Aspen, whatever the trail is.
Sunnyside?
If you go up there and you look out at the Elk Range, especially in the spring when the valleys are green, I mean there's no mountain range in the world that matches that in beauty. You know, the Colorado 13ers and the 14ers, they're not monumental master peaks. They're fun, they're accessible, they have served us by allowing us to be acclimated when we go to those big peaks, and that's the primary reason why Fritz moved here. He'd get 14,000 feet, and by the time he got to Asia, he was already acclimated, well above where a lot of people from Europe were. And you can get to those altitudes in Europe, but you have glaciers and you've got difficult terrain. I can get up at 5 in the morning and go climb up Baldy behind Snowmass, which is 13,000 feet, and be at work by 9 o'clock. You can't do that anywhere else in the world. and so it's you know.
Call me tomorrow morning and we'll go. Yeah.
When you look at that aspect of it, and you consider that, I mean, conservatively, I mean, Steve and I, just through training, I mean, it's the ultimate training. You know, after, you know, conservatively several hundred ascents of 13ers and 14ers around the state. I mean, where else can you do that? That's a huge part of our success. It's a huge part of it. So, and it's fun. I mean, you're not going to make your mark in the annals of international mountaineering or ski mountaineering by going out and doing that, but it's such a stepping stone to giving you, it just gives you such an advantage when you go to the 6,000 meter peaks in the Andes, and when you go to the 7,000 and 8,000 meter peaks in the Himalaya, or the 6,000 meter peaks in the Himalaya. and it's just fun. It's accessible. You don't have glaciers, and you can go alone. You can do solo a lot of stuff. It's just, it's the most incredible place to grow up, and it's a huge part of why we're successful. Aspen is a really unique mountain town. So.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. That was, I went a little over it.